It was walking with a horrible limp and dragging itself across the road on two legs. The motions were unnatural. I slammed on the brakes, thinking someone had driven off the road and was stuck or injured. When I was younger, each summer, and almost every New Year's, my family would pack up their car and go on a road trip to visit my family down in Mexico. We never had any problems until one particular trip when I was 8. Like every road trip before, we left our home in North Texas around 6 p.m. in order to reach our destination by the next morning. So, around 2 a.m., we crossed into Mexico, and that's when things got really weird. When you're on the only stretch of freeway in the middle of the desert, you don't tend to freak out about having the same car behind you for miles. It was practically pitch black outside our car windows, the only visible shapes being the dotted stars and the eerie silhouettes of the cacti. We'd been in Mexico for about an hour and still had a few more to drive. I remember sleeping, but still being semi-conscious of what was around me. So, when my mother suddenly spoke my dad's name, I heard her. "Miguel, that car behind us. It's been behind us since we left Laredo." My dad looked in the rearview mirror and peeked at the car, but shrugged off my mother's tension. A lot of cars use this road. He's probably going to Reynosa or another city, and my dad left it at that. Despite his sureness, my mom kept a weary eye on the car behind us. By this time, my siblings and I were hyper-aware of this car, and we entertained ourselves by watching the car through the gaps in the luggage. We got tired of that pretty quickly, though. A few more minutes passed, and then I heard my mom say, "Miguel, he's getting closer." We turned and watched the car inch closer and closer to ours. "He's too close, Miguel." And she was right. By this time, the car was practically pressed up against the rear of our car, and on a lonely stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere with another few hours until daylight, it was downright scary. There wasn't a whole lot that we could do. My dad didn't slow down, didn't stop, and he didn't speed away either. He just drove, and the car followed. The next 30 minutes were the most intense we had ever experienced. The car would ease off sometimes, only to press its blinding headlights against our rear once more. It was during one of these periods that the car pulled away, that my mom spotted a cop car up ahead, parked on the side of the road. She didn't miss a beat. "Pull over. Right in front of the police. Pull over right now, Miguel." And my dad did. The car didn't stop. It kept driving past us. I wonder how confused the police officer must have been as he watched our dad park right in front of him. The officer got out of his car and came over to us. He asked what was wrong, and my mother urgently told him everything. The car, the way it followed us, the way it taunted us. The officer took her claims very seriously, and he told us how people were victimized and had their cars stolen out here on these empty highways. He said there was lots of thugs and lots of criminals around. He then offered to drive behind us for a little while to make us feel more safe. We drove off with the police cruiser behind us, relieved. That is, until about 10 minutes later, when we saw something that confirmed the policeman's words and my mother's worst fears. 10 minutes later, we saw the car pulled over on the side of the road, waiting. So, I'm writing this to warn you, or to educate you. I haven't decided yet. But you need to understand something. I don't know what I saw, but I do know that I never want to see it again. After you hear this story, please don't go out looking for it. Please. To begin the story, I live and go to college in a small mountain town in Colorado, but I often go home to see my family, as most of them live in Texas. Now, in order to get home, I have to make most of my drive through New Mexico, specifically through Santa Fe and about 160 miles through the charmingly bare New Mexico desert. If you're not familiar with it, don't try to get acquainted. Or if you're planning to head out there, I hope this story will change your mind. On this particular drive, I had 3 other people with me: my younger sister, Andrea, and 2 friends from school, Jess and Katie. It was our spring break, and instead of buying stupidly priced plane tickets, we decided to pile into my little Mercury Mariner and book it back to Texas. Unfortunately, we got a late start leaving the valley due to somebody, it was me, forgetting their wallet. So by the time we hit the stretch of desert, it was close to 1 a.m. It had been raining since before we headed through Santa Fe. Not super heavy rain, but heavy enough. It was 65 degrees, and I remember that quite clearly because it had been in the negatives for quite a while due to where I go to school. So I was pleased to see something over 5 degrees. For the next part of this story, I need you to understand something. I had not been driving for that long. I was awake. I did not hallucinate this, and I damn sure wasn't the only one who saw it. We passed by a white Prius in the oncoming lane of traffic. As he was driving away, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw something crossing the road. It was hard to make out, but we caught it in the red glow of my taillights. It was walking with a horrible limp and dragging itself across the road on 2 legs. The motions were unnatural, jerky even. I slammed on the brakes, thinking someone had driven off the road and was stuck or injured. I slid to a stop about 20 feet away from it. That's when I noticed the other car had stopped as well. They must have seen the person in the road too. I rolled down my window and stuck my head out into the rain to get a better view. It wasn't human. It stopped moving, its figure illuminated by the taillights of both our cars. It had to have been at least 7 feet tall, maybe 8. The skin was stretched like a too small t-shirt, cracking, hanging off its frame in long ribbons. Its jaw was almost totally unhinged from its face, the cheekbones gaunt and disgusting, and the smell. Jesus, I'd never smelled anything like that. As soon as I opened my door, it hit me. Rotting flesh. Meat that had been left out for months. The kind of stuff nightmares are made out of. It felt like forever, but it must have just been a few seconds. The Prius took off, squealing its tires into the night. But I stayed. Fight or flight hadn't kicked in for me yet. This thing, whatever it was, could not have been more than 20 feet away. It slowly turned its head, each vertebrae in its neck individually cracking like bubble wrap. We made eye contact, but I couldn't see its eyes. It was just dark sockets. That's when I slammed my car door shut and sped off. At this point, my friends had all awoken, and they all saw it. Katie was in the back, screaming. Jess was silent, her mouth set to a grim, white line. My sister Andrea just sat there with a look of horror, tears silently streaming down her face. My friends kept screaming. I didn't know what to tell her. I just kept driving, my hands gripping the steering wheel as we broke 80. Then, something happened that I still cannot explain to this day. Like I said, it had been raining, right? Well, The temperature had dropped during this whole event. I looked at the display in my car that told me the temperature, and it now said it was 30 degrees out. It had been 65 degrees no more than 5 minutes ago. The rain, it was snowing now. Hard, heavy, wet snow. We ended up pulling over at a gas station called Klein's Corner. No one moved. Andrea was crying. Jess was praying. Katie was cursing, and I was shaking. Violently. "What the fuck just happened?" Katie said. All the color drained from her face. I looked over at her, my face tight with fear. "I don't know. I don't know what that was, but we have to go." I slowly put the car into drive and continued our trip. The rest of the drive was unmemorable. Everything was fine. We reached Texas by 6 a.m., and nothing else happened. I don't know what it could have been. The closest thing I could think of was a skinwalker. Maybe it was some sort of shapeshifter that had a bad change. I don't know. But please believe me when I tell you this. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. If you happen to find yourself driving alone at night in that barren New Mexico desert, please don't go looking for it. If you see it, don't follow it, because it might follow you back. Well, what did you think of those? Did they really see a skinwalker out there? Or did they happen to stumble across somebody who might have needed help? That's what I thought of when I first heard it. Maybe somebody got into a car accident, or, I don't know, ran into some sketchy characters out in New Mexico. Maybe that 7 or 8 foot tall, mangled mess stumbled upon a group of people that they shouldn't have stumbled upon. Hopefully not. Hopefully it's just a tall tale. But I'll leave it with you. If you liked the video, give it a like. If you disliked it, give it a dislike. And I'll hopefully see you on the next one. I hope you're taking care of yourself and treating yourself well. Have a good night. Bye for now.